Well, good evening. We are live tonight on the Mississippi Family Homestead live stream. We try to do this each weeknight at 7:30 Central. And thank you for joining us. By the way, if you haven't yet, please don't forget to like and subscribe. We're talking about the 10 things that you can do to keep your chickens warm on a freezing day because it is some freezing temperatures here in Mississippi. My name is Scott.
And I'm Tina. Yeah, right now it got down, I think, to 22 last night and the same tonight. So the chickens are, they're really trying to stay warm out there in the coop. So I know this morning I went out and all of their water was frozen and I had to unfreeze it. So we're going to talk about some ways and things to do to try to keep them warm during the cold weather.
And by the way, drop a chat and let us know the coldest you've ever seen in your area. Now, we are down south. The coldest in our area on record, the coldest ever on record is 0 degrees Fahrenheit in January 12th, 1962. I actually thought it got a little colder than that before.
I thought so too. Where'd you
I
get
don't
that
know.
information?
This is, I'll have to research that. But
I think we do.
it also says -4 in 1963. So, I guess it was recorded in the county we're in, but I think maybe it was -4. But that's,
that sounds more like it.
Yeah.
That'd be -4.
in 1963. And there was a major snow event in 1963. I remember my mom talking about it.
Yeah, my mom talked about it too. Being like, I don't know, a few feet of good many feet of snow.
It pretty well shut this area down, and but it does get cold. So let's talk about how to protect those chickens and keep your chickens warm. And one of the 10 ways is the deep litter method. So what method is that, and what do you do for that?
Okay, so the deep litter method is, first of all, make sure that you're using the right type of bedding for your chickens. You want to use some pine shavings or some hemp. And also, on the bottom of mine, I use they're wood pellets is what they are. It's bedding that you use for horses, but you can also use that for chickens. Once it breaks down, it kind of creates insulation on the bottom of those pine shavings, and it'll help keep the chickens warm. And you kind of leave their litter in there. You can clean off the worst part of it, but you kind of leave the majority of it in there, and then you just put on new as you go throughout the winter. And you may want to clean it out once during the winter, but just let it accumulate and build up, and the bottom of that creates an insulation for your chickens. And it helps, just like we would have insulation, it creates an insulation in there, and you just add that new litter on top of the old after you spot clean it.
And you don't want to use pine straw, do you?
No pine straw. And I mean, you can use hay, but I suggest that you mix it with the pine shavings if you're going to use hay. Hay and straw, they kind of get moldy and wet, especially if you try to use the deep litter method.
Especially in the winter, I guess.
Yeah, especially out in your run area. That hay gets really kind of moldy, and straw will too. Pine shavings is the best thing that I've learned to use with those not layer pellets. Listen to me, with the shavings on top of those pellets.
Okay. If you're just joining us, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe, and let us know in the chat the coldest temperature you've ever had on your homestead. Another thing is the drafts and the ventilation in your chicken coop. Believe it or not, that's very important on how you do that and keeping your chickens warm.
Yeah, it is. So one thing that you need to do is make sure that you don't have a whole lot of drafts on the bottom of your chicken coop and in the roosting area where they're roosting, but you do want to have some ventilation up at the top. You don't want it to get a whole lot of moisture in there, because that can cause mold and mildew and humidity. And therefore, like us, if you're out camping, you're not going to zip your sleeping bag all the way up. You got to have somewhere to breathe. So that's the ventilation at the top. They need somewhere for the fumes from their waste to go up, and to go out of that chicken coop. And also, it'll help keep them sleep better if they have some ventilation at the top. You don't want it completely sealed up.
And you on the bottom, you do want to try to seal around the bottom so
Yeah.
there's no leakage right there where
Yeah.
they are.
Yeah.
And you know, on our coop that we built, we do have the vents are at the top, aren't they?
Yes, they're at the
going in.
top. I think they have one little window where they can look out on one of the roofs.
Yeah.
But it's at the top. It's not, down low at the bottom of the
Yeah.
coop.
So, and they can, they can get in and bunch up, and that's kind of how they stay warm.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing I didn't think about, we do have all wood roosting bars, don't we?
Yes, we do have all wood roosting bars. So that's one of the things. You don't want to have metal roosting bars. Those will get really cold. I see a lot of these prefab chicken coops that have metal roosting bars. That is no for your chickens. You want to have wood roosting bars. A lot of people have flat roosting bars, especially if you're way up north. It just kind of helps them flatten out their feet. So when they're sitting down on them and sleeping at night, it helps keep their toes a little bit warmer. Now, ours are round, and I've never had a problem with, the ones that we have getting frostbite on their toes, because it doesn't get zero here. At the worst, I think it gets in the 20s, every now and then during the wintertime. And so just keep that in mind. You want them to be able to have a roosting bar at least, so they can keep their feet warm when they're sitting down on their feet. So when they sit like that, their toes kind of curl on it, and then they sit down on it and they keep their toes warm.
So is, the next thing is, I think number 4, is there any kind of snacks that help keep them warm?
Yeah. So,
And I would assume that's just during the day, right?
so what you want to do is feed them a warm snack right before they go to roost at night. So what I do is I make them a kind of mash, and I give them a little bit of cornmeal to give it some substance. Put some cracked corn in there, and maybe some mealworms. I also cook them some eggs to give them some protein, and I kind of mix all that together and with warm water, and make a little, like a mash out of it right before they go to bed, and it helps keep them warm. So as they're breaking down that food, it gives them energy during the night, and it helps them to stay warmer when they have that warm food, and when they're breaking that down throughout the night in their crawl. And you can also feed them something warm when they get up in the mornings. Also, that'll help them warm up. So.
And as we move on, I know one thing that the hardest thing to do, especially if you're up north, but also sometimes here in the South, is keep that water going, keep it, from freezing, because if the top layer of their water freezes, they can't get water.
Yeah. So they make water bowls for dogs and cats that heat up. So if you're up north, that's a good thing to do, is get one of those bowls that kind of keep that water from freezing. I don't have those. I just use their normal, little cup things that they drink out of, and just waters, regular chicken waters. So what I do is every morning, if it's freezing, I get some jugs of hot water, and I take those jugs out there and I pour it over the little cups and then into their actual water, so it unfreezes it. And that way it will, stay unfrozen after that point. If it's going to be freezing throughout the day, you're going to need to do that a couple of times during the day, 2 to 3 times, according to how cold it is. You don't want them to eat ice because ice makes their temperature drop in their body and they can get cold and they'll get sick. So you want to make sure that they have at least temperature, like room temperature water. It doesn't need to be freezing water.
And another thing you mentioned a while back is, I think you said it last week, and I didn't really believe you, and I researched it, and you
Yeah.
can you can actually put Vaseline on the combs of like a rooster.
Yeah. So if you have a rooster or even a hen that has a tall comb, you can put Vaseline and it'll help them from getting frostbite. Now, our older rooster, Nick, out there, he's had frostbite and his comb kind of turned black. And I didn't, I've never thought about putting Vaseline on his comb to protect it until now. It's just something I didn't know. And he had a sore, on his comb. It kind of turned black and it got kind of sore and the hens would peck at it. So it's a good thing, to use some Vaseline or, just make sure that they're not going to get frostbite in the wintertime. He really kind of, it kind of yucky, they were kind of pecking at it and
Mhm.
stuff. And I had to get some medicine and put on there because it was really bloody and, kind of yucky.
Well, another thing, by the way, if you're just joining us, we're talking about 10 ways to keep your chickens warm in the wintertime or on a freezing night like tonight down in the deep south. Mississippi is where we're from. And last night was very cold. Tonight, not quite as cold, but
Yeah.
still, I think it's going to get below freezing, isn't
Yeah,
it?
in the 20s. Last night it was 22, and tonight I think it's going to be about 26 maybe.
Yeah. So
So,
luckily tonight it's not going to be very windy, but if it is going to be very, windy, you need to make sure you have protection for that.
yeah. So, if the bottom of your coop, some people on the bottom of their coops, they just have wire. They don't have wood on the bottom like we do. So if you have that on your coop, make sure that you're putting something up underneath that, whether it's a tarp or some plastic or something, especially if it gets really, really cold, to keep that draft out of there so that wind won't go through. And make sure that you're shutting your doors. Have a chicken door that closes in the wintertime. In the summertime, you kind of, we leave that open, but in the wintertime, you want to have the door closed because that keeps that wind draft from going through there. And you have that ventilation at the top, but you don't want that wind draft going through there and getting your chickens cold. Now, what some people do also, especially if you're way up north, on the run area, they'll put a tarp or plastic on the lower part of their run area during the wintertime, and that'll help keep the snow
Yeah.
from getting in there and getting it wet in the run area. And it's also a good idea, especially if you're up north, to have a covered area for the run area. Just keeps them from getting so cold in the wintertime.
Yeah, a lot of this depends on what area you're in.
Mm-hmm.
If you're, in the deep south, you do need to be a little prepared for it because we do ever, have some cold weather, but up north in the United States or other countries around the world, you could have long-term weather
Right,
that gets,
right.
real cold.
Yeah, so it's good idea to have it covered, and they need air and they need to be able to breathe even in the wintertime. But if you'll put that tarp or plastic around the bottom of their area, their run area, that'll help keep all that wind, help keep the wind and the snow from getting in there.
So what about if they're bored, like if they're not exercising enough? Does that
Okay.
help?
Yeah, so they need to exercise, so it helps them keep warm. So in the wintertime, they don't really want to move a whole lot. They want to just kind of sit there. So you want to get them some like a head of cabbage and tie a rope to it, hang it down so they kind of have to jump to get to that. Or any treat. They make treat bags that you can kind of hang, and if you'll put
Yeah.
that up above where they're kind of having to jump to get to it, make them work to get to their to get to their food, and that'll give them something to do. Also, now we have roosting bars out in our run area, and my chickens like to jump up on those roosting bars. So even in your run area, if you'll have a space like that where they have some roosting bars, they can get up off the ground and that'll help keep their feet warmer and help them stay warmer from just, sitting on the ground during the day.
Yeah.
And also, maybe just feed them, make sure you feed them those snacks. That helps them be active. If you're going in there and feeding them some snacks, they're running around. Put it on the ground. Don't just put it all in one clump. Put it on the ground so they're having to scratch and dig for that grain and stuff.
Yeah.
And those mealworms, they love their mealworms in the wintertime and in the summer. But, if they're scratching on the ground trying to find that food, that helps keep them warm too.
Yeah. They go crazy over those mealworms. So,
Yeah, they love mealworms.
So what about, adding a heater or something like that? Do you ever do that?
We say no to heat lamps. Now, the only thing that I say, if it's 20 below, you may need to put some kind of heater in there, but not one of those red heat lamps. What we put is what you call a brooder heater, and those do not get hot enough to catch anything on fire. But those bulb heaters, they get extremely, extremely hot, and you hear.
And we have seen them cause a fire.
Yes.
So I don't think I would. I think at our point, I don't think I would ever use one of those light bulbs, because that around the hay or pine shavings just would start a fire. So you need to be real careful about what you put in there.
Yeah, and you don't. If you add the heat when it's 20 below, that's okay. But it doesn't need to be in there all the time. Your electricity goes out. Your chickens have depended on that heat to stay warm and for it to be 50 degrees in there. And they're not going to be cold hardy. They're not going to be used to that cold. So they need to get used to that. And now, right now, my little babies that I have outside, they're, what are they, 6 or 7 weeks old now. Now they have all their feathers and they're outside. So I still have their brooder heater in there. And I kind of put some towels around over the top of the cage when it's, as cold as it is, like last night and tonight. But during the day when it's not as cold, I do unplug that heater because they don't need it. They need to get used to the cold weather. If they become dependent on that heater, then it's just not good for them. They can't be a chicken. You don't want pampered chickens. They have to learn to live in the cold.
And no matter what you do, make sure you read the instructions, follow all the safety safety procedures. Because we have seen people get a fire started because of not doing it properly.
That's right.
So be very careful. Always read the instructions on that. So now, what about different breeds? Is there different breeds that are better in some areas?
So if you're up north, you want to find a breed that doesn't have a large comb, because the combs will freeze. So that's one thing you need to be prepared for. Just if you're getting chickens, research the breeds so you don't have, the wrong breed for your area. The, let's see, the Rhode Island Reds are really good birds. And the Buff Orpingtons, I think those come in a variety of colors. You can get brown or like a yellow color, kind of gray. Those are all different colors of the Orpingtons, and they're kind of fluffy and big, and they stay warmer the bigger they are. And like the Americanas, they don't even have large combs, so those would be good, and they actually get to be big birds. So that helps keep them warm. Now, the Silkies, like we have, they're not good for cold weather. They're just not a hardy breed for the colder weather. They're kind of small and they don't get real big. And if you're going to have Silkies, just make sure you have a whole group of them so they'll get together and help, warm up, and make sure you have that deep litter. Now, my Silkies don't like to roost. They don't like to get up on the roosting bars. So I have to make sure that I have that litter in there pretty deep. I actually had to go change it Sunday and make sure that I had it piled, really, really high for them in their roosting area because they refuse to get on the roost. I don't know. And you let me know in the comments below if you have Silkies and they don't like getting on the roost, but mine don't. They never have. From day one, they're not like my other chickens. They don't like getting up on the roost.
So once again, if you're if you have chickens, especially tonight in the deep South, Mississippi, Alabama, in that area where we're getting some really cold weather, these tips are hopefully be helpful to you. To kind of recap, it's make sure the coop is dry. You know, no drafts to block that wind. Lots of food
Yes,
and
make sure you
food they can work for. Exercise to get. And probably one of the most important things is to make sure the water is liquid.
yeah, yeah, that is really important. You kind of think about chickens, maybe they could eat snow to stay hydrated, but they can't. They don't need to eat snow and ice. That just makes them colder and their temperature drop.
So hopefully this has been helpful to you. We are doing this live stream for homesteaders and especially people raising chickens every weeknight at 7:30 Central. If you've got something you want discussed, or if you've got something to add to tonight's talk, just drop it in the chat and let us know how you keep um, your
Your chickens
chickens.
warm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
let us
yeah.
know how you keep them warm. Especially, I'd be interested to know up north how you keep them warm and what you have to go through because
Right.
you know
It's hard even here to go out there when it's freezing cold like this and, undo their water and, make sure that it's not frozen. But again, I know you can get those heated water bowls for, you can get them for cats and dogs. And I'm sure there's something that you can get to go down in that water to keep it from freezing. But I know it's hard for me to go out there and unfreeze. I think it's 4 different water bowls, every morning. So it's not freezing and they're not drinking that cold water.
Yeah, and so hopefully it's been helpful to you. We're doing this every weeknight at 7:30. Tomorrow we're going to talk about some ways that maybe you could save money on your homestead if you're starting out a homestead and want to try to be frugal, and we'll talk about that and hopefully see you tomorrow. And if this has been helpful to you, let us know in the chat, and good luck on keeping those chickens warm.
That's right. Thank you for watching.
Have a good night. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe.